In today's noisy, fast-paced world, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, lost, or constantly pulled in 100 different directions. Social media bombards us with endless opinions. Expectations from others weigh heavily on our shoulders. We try to keep up, chasing attention, seeking validation, trying to be everything for everyone. But what if the real answer isn't found in more effort, but in letting go? Imagine standing at the edge of a quiet lake early in the morning. Surface is still undisturbed. You toss a pebble and only then does the water ripple. That's what inner peace feels like. You control when and how to respond, not the world around you. That's the heart of emotional detachment, and why so few ever master it. This video is your introduction to a different way of living, a way rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom, yet more relevant today than ever before. We're not talking about ignoring your emotions or pretending nothing affects you. We're talking about reclaiming your power by refusing to be ruled by things you cannot control. You may wonder, isn't detachment cold? No, detachment is clarity. It's knowing what's yours to carry and releasing what isn't. When you stop reacting to every slight, every delay, every opinion thrown your way, you create room for peace to grow. This is the beginning of your journey, not to care less, but to care more intentionally. And as we explore this path together, you'll begin to see how letting go is not giving up, but rising above. Are you ready to feel that shift? Detachment isn't about building walls. It's about building strength from within. Many confuse emotional detachment with indifference or numbness, but that's not what the Stoics meant. What they practiced, and what this video guides you through, is something much more powerful: a clear-eyed, deliberate mindset that allows you to face life's challenges with unshakable calm. Imagine a storm blowing fiercely outside. While trees bend and sway, the mountain stands firm. That's you when you stop letting temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. Emotional detachment teaches you that your worth isn't tied to someone else's approval. You don't need to win someone over to prove your value. You already have value by how you carry yourself, how you act under pressure, and how you stay grounded no matter what others do. When a woman pulls away, when someone ghosts you, when you're left with silence instead of closure, that's your moment to rise. Not by chasing, not by demanding answers, but by detaching with dignity. True strength is revealed not in pursuit, but in presence. When you stop begging for clarity and start embodying it, you become unshakably attractive. Because you're playing games, but because you've mastered yourself. This principle flows through every relationship, every challenge. You must be willing to lose others to never lose yourself. A man who lives by that rule walks with quiet confidence, is not afraid of loss because he knows he's whole with, or without anyone's approval. That's what makes him unforgettable. Let this video be your wake-up call, not to pull back from love, but to show up differently. The goal isn't to push people away. The goal is to stop pushing yourself aside, just to be loved. That's the real art of detachment. As we move deeper into the practice of emotional detachment, one essential principle becomes clear: the power of restraint. Most people equate strength with reaction, responding instantly, proving a point, or asserting dominance. But in reality, it is the ability to pause, to not respond right away, that reveals true inner strength. When you learn to restrain your impulses and observe your emotions instead of being controlled by them, you begin to live with intention rather than reaction. Think about it: how many times have you regretted saying something in the heat of the moment? That rush of emotion often feels powerful in the moment, but its consequences linger far longer than the feeling itself. Stoic philosophy teaches us that the wise are not those who never feel, but those who respond only when necessary and never out of pure emotion. Detachment is not a lack of care. It is caring deeply, but choosing not to be ruled by outcomes. You can love someone, support a friend, or work passionately on a project, while still remaining at peace if things don't go your way. You recognize that your effort is within your control, the outcome is not. This mindset builds confidence. You become unshakable, not because you avoid life's chaos, but because you meet it calmly without losing yourself. Emotional restraint turns storms into whispers. It turns confusion into clarity. The more you practice it, the more you discover how peaceful your life can be when your reactions are aligned with your values, not your moods. Imagine living a life where your peace is unbothered by someone else's opinion, your purpose untouched by fleeting emotions. That is what emotional detachment gives you, not indifference, but mastery. Mastery over your inner world, which in turn transforms how you navigate the outer one. Another essential principle in detachment is the ability to walk away with dignity. In relationships, careers, or even daily conversations, we often cling too tightly, fearing what will happen if we let go. But the truth is, walking away isn't always loss, it's often liberation. It signals that your peace is more valuable than forcing something to work. You stop begging for respect, validation, or attention. Instead, you become the source of your own self-worth. Picture this: a man who refuses to argue when provoked, who chooses silence over chaos, who walks away not out of weakness, but because he knows nothing valuable comes from shouting into a storm. That kind of presence? Unforgettable. It lingers. It inspires both curiosity and admiration. When you no longer chase what isn't yours to keep, you reclaim power. You stop living in emotional debt. Detachment teaches you that not everything and not everyone is meant to stay. And that's not a tragedy, it's a transition. The right things flow toward still water, not chaos. When you remove your energy from places where it's not appreciated, you create space for peace, clarity, and growth. You'll be amazed at how people respond when you stop responding. Your absence speaks. Your silence shifts dynamics. Suddenly, those who once took you for granted begin to notice what they've lost, not because you yelled it, but because you stopped showing up. With your energy, there's power in knowing when to stay and when to go. And when you walk away with grace, without bitterness, without explanation, you remind the world that your presence is a choice, not a given. That's the strength detachment offers. Not just emotional protection, but spiritual freedom. It's the freedom to say, I release this and I rise. Let's be honest, how many times have you tried to prove your worth to someone who barely acknowledged your efforts? You bent over backward, gave more than you had, responded faster than you should have, and for what? To be noticed? To be valued. The truth is, the more you try to earn someone's attention, the more invisible you become in their eyes. This is where the art of emotional detachment becomes your quiet superpower. Emotional detachment isn't coldness or cruelty. It's about protecting your peace. It's the decision to stop over-explaining, stop begging for clarity, and stop waiting on someone who keeps you as a backup plan. When you detach, you stop being emotionally reactive. You become a mystery, and in that mystery, you become powerful. Women, like anyone else, are drawn to presence, not pressure. They're drawn to the person who knows their value and doesn't need to convince anyone of it. Think about it. A man who stays grounded while the world demands a reaction is rare. A man who doesn't flinch when someone pulls away, he becomes unforgettable. Because his stability isn't dependent on how someone else feels about him. He doesn't collapse when left unread. Doesn't spiral over mixed signals. He observes processes and continues building his life undistracted.
This is
Not about playing games. It's about emotional maturity. It's knowing that not every message deserves a reply. Not every invitation is a blessing, and not every woman who shows interest deserves your energy. The moment you realize this, you rise. And in rising, you become the man who no longer needs to chase, because your presence alone commands respect. Becoming that man takes discipline, takes self-awareness. But once you master detachment, you won't just stop chasing others. You'll start attracting exactly what you deserve. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring wisely. There comes a time when a man must step back, not out of weakness, but because his peace has become more valuable than the chaos that once disguised itself as love. In this moment, he realizes that chasing only depletes him. Silence speaks louder than repetition. That walking away, without a dramatic exit, is far more powerful than begging for closure that never comes. She may expect you to double text, to wait endlessly, to wonder where you went wrong. But what happens when you don't? When you simply breathe, turn inward, and refocus your energy on rebuilding what she unknowingly chipped away your sense of self. That's when things shift. That's when she begins to feel your absence as more than just space. It becomes contrast. She remembers your presence not as noise, but as a calm she never quite understood until it vanished. This is emotional. Detachment at its core, not apathy, but presence with boundaries. You are no longer emotionally available for inconsistency. You're no longer addicted to hope that's rooted in her potential rather than your reality. Detachment means you've learned the difference between being chosen and choosing wisely. You are no longer accessible on demand. And it is precisely in this distance that your value crystallizes. And yes, she will feel it. She'll test the waters, send a breadcrumb text, try to pull you back into the role you outgrew. But you've evolved. You've seen the cost of sacrificing your peace for the illusion of closeness. Detachment means you can still love her from afar without losing yourself in the process. It's holding space without losing your ground. That's when you become unforgettable, not for what you gave, but for what you no longer need to give. It's not for how loud you loved, but for how quietly you let go. You see, the world teaches men that detachment means coldness, but that's wrong. Detachment is clarity. It's the ability to stand in front of someone you care about and not collapse at the weight of their indecision. It's walking away with your dignity intact when your soul knows it's time. It's not heartless, it's self-respect in motion. In a society that romanticizes obsession, your calm detachment confuses her. While others chase, you choose. While others plead, you pause. That silence, it gets louder. And in that quiet, she starts questioning what she thought was certain. She wonders if she misjudged your depth, if she underestimated your strength. She realized too late that your presence was a privilege, not a guarantee. This version of you is not emotionally unavailable. It's emotionally intelligent. You don't react to games, you don't beg for attention, and you certainly don't trade your peace for validation. You're building a life so full and meaningful that no single person can unbalance you. That's power. It's detachment. And when she looks back, because she wills, she won't remember the messages you sent or the efforts you made. No. She'll remember the day your energy shifted. The moment she stopped being your priority and you became your own. That's when you became unforgettable. Remember this? You don't lose her by letting go. You lose yourself by holding on too long. Let her feel your absence. Let her face the silence. Let her see what happens when a grounded man finally walks away. Not to punish, but to protect his peace. True resilience isn't forged in calm waters, but in the fiercest of storms. When life tests us, when the world seems to conspire against our peace, it's not the external chaos that defines us, but the stillness we cultivate within. The Stoics understood this well. They didn't seek an easy life, but one rooted in principle, discipline, and unshakable self-control. Think of a candle that continues to burn even in the wind. That's the kind of presence a Stoic man brings into the room. While others get swayed by every opinion, every delay, every emotion, he remains grounded. It's not about indifference. It's about discernment. He chooses what deserves his energy and what doesn't. In today's world, people overreact to everything: social media posts, delayed responses, minor inconveniences. But the man who has trained his mind, who sees the game for what it is, doesn't play by those rules. He watches. He learns. And when he moves, it's with precision and calm intention. This composure doesn't make him distant, makes him magnetic, because deep down, we all crave a sense of certainty. Someone who isn't tossed around by waves, someone who holds his ground. That's what makes this kind of man unforgettable, not because he's the loudest, but because his silence speaks volumes. The Stoics didn't need validation, applause, or reassurance. They knew the greatest victory was mastering the self. So when she wonders why she can't stop thinking about you, it's not the words you said or the gifts you gave. It's the way you stayed still when everything else wavered. It's the calm in your eyes when she expected rage. It's the self-respect that didn't need to beg or chase. You become a mirror, not reflecting her chaos, but showing her what peace looks like. And in a world that constantly pulls people in 1,000 directions, you become her anchor. That's the real power. That's the essence of Stoicism in action. This type of man doesn't panic when she pulls away. He doesn't question his worth based on someone else's temporary confusion. Instead, he leans into solitude, into silence. He sharpens his vision, revisits his principles, and reminds himself why he doesn't chase, but attracts. It isn't about ego, it's about focus. While others lose themselves in proving their worth, he proves nothing because he doesn't need to. In moments of tension, he doesn't react, he responds. He doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. His energy carries weight. His presence is felt long after he leaves the room. And that's what keeps her mind tethered, long after she's walked away. You see, it's not mystery that captivates Hert's mastery. Mastery over your thoughts, emotions, and actions. It's not pretending to be strong. It's actually being strong. Not because you hide pain, but because you faced it, owned it, and alchemized it into wisdom. The man who practices this level of control isn't cold, he's clear. He isn't detached from feelings, he's detached from drama. He doesn't resist love, but he no longer needs it to feel whole. And when she senses that, when she sees a man who could love her, but doesn't need to, something inside her shifts. That's why she can't forget him. Because in a world that rewards noise, he is peace. In a world of proving, he is presence. And in a world of reaction, he is reflection. That's the legacy of detachment. That's the quiet storm of Stoicism. He doesn't chase because he knows what he brings is rare. And what is rare doesn't run, it simply waits calmly for what recognizes its value. Detaching isn't about walking away with arrogance. It's about walking away with self-respect. A woman can feel the difference between a man who disappears out of ego and a man who detaches out of peace. And strangely, the latter leaves the deeper mark. When you stop reacting, when you no longer need to explain, when you don't try to be understood, she starts to feel something she can't control. Curiosity. That's the seed of longing. Women are not drawn to men who need them. They are drawn to men who are full with or without them. Because that fullness feels safe, rare, and strangely familiar to a deeper part of themselves that's tired of games. Remember, the man who can sit in silence, who can choose not to speak, not to argue, not to beg. He creates an energy too uncommon to forget. So stop trying to prove your worth. Just embody it. Detachment is often misunderstood. It's not about coldness or ghosting someone to prove a point. True detachment is a quiet, grounded act of self-respect. When a man chooses to walk away not because he wants to hurt her, but because he refuses to hurt himself, everything changes. That energy, she feels it deeply. There's a massive difference between disappearing in anger and detaching in peace. A woman can sense it immediately. The man who vanishes from ego leaves behind a question. The man who withdraws calmly leaves behind an echo, a presence she can't quite shake. That stillness, that composure, it haunts her in ways loud emotions never could. When you no longer chase, no longer explain yourself, no longer argue for her attention, she notices that shift is powerful. Because instead of reacting, you're now choosing. Instead of proving, you're embodying. This is what sparks a very specific kind of female curiosity. The kind that pulls her back, again and again. Why isn't he chasing? Why does he seem more at peace without me than I am without him? That question lingers. It grows. And with it grows desire. Not for the man who begged, but for the man who could let go with grace. Women are instinctively drawn to fullness, to calm, to presence, to the man who feels whole with or without them. It isn't neediness that captures the heart, it's wholeness. Because that wholeness feels strong, safe, and familiar in a way words can't explain. So if you're wondering what to say next, maybe the most powerful thing is to say nothing. Let your calm do the talking. Let your standards do the work. And let your absence create the space for her realization. Stop explaining your values, start living it. Be the kind of man whose energy lingers long after he's gone. Arrogance, that's quiet strength. That's unforgettable. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes he's done everything right, called her back, made plans, stayed consistent, yet somehow she seems less interested. That moment stings. It's when you start questioning everything. Was I too available? Did I care too much? But here's the harsh truth. What draws women in is rarely effort. It's energy. It's not the number of good morning texts or planned dinners. It's how your presence makes her feel when you're not even trying. Women are naturally drawn to mystery, to a sense of challenge, to the subtle tension of not knowing what you'll do next. Not because they want games, but because emotional polarity fuels attraction. When a man is emotionally predictable, constantly available and centered around her, she feels the weight of his need. It's not romantic, it's pressure, and pressure repels. The man who knows how to detach, who knows how to walk away not out of spite, but out of self-worth, holds a power few understand. He doesn't withhold to manipulate. He withholds to protect his peace. He chooses when to engage and when to disappear. He doesn't chase validation. He creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, she feels his absence. She questions herself, replays moments. She wonders if she misjudged him. The real shift happens when you no longer react, no longer explain. Silence becomes your statement. Stillness becomes your strength. That's when you flip the dynamic from being the one waiting to being the one remembered. Detachment isn't rejection. It's redirection. It's choosing your energy over her attention. It's the magnetic calm of a man who knows he doesn't need to prove anything because his... Let's take a moment to reflect not just on what we've heard, but on who we are becoming through this journey. This isn't just about knowledge. It's about transformation. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." In a world that rarely slows down, we must choose to pause, to think, to ask, are my actions aligned with my values? Am I walking the path I want, or the one expected of me? Reflection isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's the willingness to course correct, to face ourselves honestly, and to adjust our sails when we're drifting. It's easy to go through life reacting, being pulled by emotion, distracted by noise, chasing things that don't matter. But true strength is found in the pause. In those quiet moments where we listen to the voice within and make conscious choices. You don't have to wait for a crisis to reflect. In fact, the wisest among us make it a daily ritual. Whether it's journaling, meditating, or simply sitting in silence for 5 minutes, reflection grounds us. It brings clarity. It helps us recognize the lessons in our missteps, the wins in our smallest victories, and the direction hidden within confusion. Think of it as a mental reset, a system update for the soul. Just like we take care of our physical health, we must nourish our inner world. Are you proud of how you handled today? What could you do differently tomorrow? These aren't criticisms. They're tools for growth. When used regularly, reflection becomes the mirror that shows us not just where we've been, but where we could go. This isn't the end of your journey. It's a checkpoint, a place to breathe, recalibrate, and recommit to the man you're becoming. You're not just learning Stoicism, you're living it. Each choice you make, each moment of pause, each time you choose principle over impulse, that's a victory. So honor this process. Keep reflecting, keep aligning, and above all, keep growing. Even in your complete silence, she will still think about you. In fact, it's often your absence, not your presence, that lingers in her thoughts the longest. The calm, quiet space you create speaks louder than 1,000 desperate texts or explanations. You may feel like you've lost her, but the truth is, you've just stepped back. That shift changes everything. It's in that stillness where your energy begins to echo. She'll start to replay your moments together, wondering what changed. Why isn't he texting anymore? Was he really who I thought he was? Has he already moved on? Aren't just fleeting thoughts, they become recurring questions that haunt her. Because you've removed the certainty she once relied on. That is the hidden power of detachment. It gives you strength without you having to lift a finger. It lets her imagination do the work while you preserve your dignity. You don't have to disappear in anger or slam doors shut to create distance. You simply stop giving your attention where it's not reciprocated. You pull back your energy with quiet intent. You stop explaining yourself. You let your presence become a privilege, not a guarantee. Now, she's the one who wonders who you're with, what you're thinking, and whether she ever really knew you. And in that emotional mystery, you become more powerful than ever. This isn't manipulation, it's mastery. It's choosing peace. Over chaos, self-respect, over obsession, the man who can stay silent, composed, and self-contained in the face of uncertainty doesn't become invisible. He becomes unforgettable. And if she ever returns, it won't be because of pressure. Will be because she can't ignore the man who finally chose himself. Stoicism doesn't demand that we bury our emotions or pretend they don't exist. On the contrary, it asks us to feel everything, but to do so with wisdom and control. It's not about emotional coldness, it's about emotional clarity. You feel sadness, joy, frustration, even love, but you don't let those feelings govern your life. You recognize them, reflect on them, and then act from a place of purpose instead of reaction. That's what sets a grounded man apart from someone tossed around by every emotional impulse. When you embrace the Stoic path, you learn to respond, not react. You cultivate the space between stimulus and response, where true power lives. Reacting is what most people do. Something happens, and they instantly lash out or crumble. But the Stoic man pauses, considers, he decides, and from that calm center, he moves forward. This is what emotional detachment truly means, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of discipline. Women notice this difference immediately. While others might be dramatic or needy, the man rooted in Stoicism becomes a beacon of calm. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't need to be understood in every moment. He simply is. That silent strength draws people in, not just women, but anyone who's weary of emotional chaos. In a world that overreacts, a man who remains composed becomes rare, almost magnetic. True Stoic detachment doesn't mean you're distant. It means you're deeply in tune with your values, your peace, and your direction, and that grounded energy. It speaks louder than any emotional outburst ever could. It whispers confidence, assurance, and presence. That's what makes a man not only unforgettable, but irreplaceable. Choosing detachment isn't about being distant or cold. It's about choosing inner peace over emotional chaos. It's about anchoring yourself so deeply in self-respect and awareness that nothing outside of you can shake your core. You are every man, whether he realizes it or not, is searching for that kind of peace. Detachment gives you that. It gives you the power to feel everything and still remain in control. You begin to observe situations without absorbing the emotional turbulence. You learn to care without clinging, to love without losing yourself in the process. Detachment doesn't mean you don't connect. It means you connect more purely or truthfully, because you're no longer driven by fear or the need for constant validation. You begin to lead from a place of inner security, not external approval. There's a unique kind of strength in being able to say, I'm okay without this. Whether it's a relationship, an outcome you hoped for, or someone's fleeting attention, it no longer defines your worth. That kind of freedom allows you to engage in life without becoming a hostage to it. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop proving and start embodying. And in this calm, confident space, your presence becomes magnetic. You no longer need to convince anyone of your value. It's evident in the way you carry yourself. That's the power of detachment. That's the essence of a grounded man, to love deeply, to engage fully, but to remain whole, regardless of what stays or leaves. It's not avoidance, it's mastery. Detachment is not a sign of indifference or emotional coldness. On the contrary, it is one of the most powerful forms of inner strength and self-love. To detach doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you've reached a point where your peace is more important than trying to control outcomes you simply cannot. Society has led many to believe that the louder you love, the more you care, that showing up constantly, chasing relentlessly, and overanalyzing every word or silence is proof of deep affection. But the Stoics teach us a wiser, more liberating truth. Real strength is calm. Detachment is the quiet courage to remain centered in the storm of emotion, to observe without immediately reacting, to feel without losing yourself, and to love without abandoning your own needs and standards. When you detach, you're not stepping away from life. You're stepping back just enough to see it clearly. You're not giving up on someone. You're giving up the illusion that your happiness depends entirely on them. It's kind of emotional discipline. Doesn't happen overnight. It takes trial, error, and often the pain of loss to learn that being obsessed, anxious, or overly invested doesn't serve you. You begin to recognize that chasing validation or being overly available usually leads to imbalance. It drains you, makes you question your worth, and often pushes people away. But detachment, that draws people in. Because calm confidence is magnetic. It's rare, I swear. And it signals that you are whole within yourself. With detachment, you allow people to come to you of their own free will. You observe their actions without clinging to expectations. You stop needing answers to every unanswered message, and instead, you make peace with the unknown.
Oh, yeah.
You stop assigning stories to every silence and begin to rest in the simplicity of what is. Ultimately, detachment is not about withdrawal. It's about returning to yourself. It's about standing in your own energy, rooted in your values, and no longer shaken by the tides of someone else's attention. In that space, you don't just protect your heart, you elevate your life. Because when you learn to let go, you make room for something far more powerful to enter: clarity, confidence, and a connection built on mutual respect, not desperation. When you begin to show up with a different energy, something profound happens, she notices. Women are deeply intuitive beings. They don't just hear your words, they feel your vibe. And when your vibe changes, when you stop overextending yourself and start drawing boundaries, it stirs something inside her. The man who used to chase, to give without limits, now stands still. He's no longer seeking approval. He no longer explains himself. Instead, he radiates a calm, grounded presence that speaks volumes without saying a word. That shift is magnetic. It's not about bitterness or retreating in anger. It's about anchoring into self-respect. When you stop trying to prove your worth, you create space. Space that allows her to pause, to feel, to reflect. She starts to notice that the emotional safety net she took for granted is no longer there. She wonders what changed. Did I lose him? Has he moved on? And in that wondering, attraction grows. Because curiosity is the soil where desire is born. You don't have to say a single thing. Your silence. It's rooted in confidence, not resentment, becomes the loudest message of all. Your emotional shift, your poise, your ability to walk away without making noise, begins to echo in her mind. She may not admit it, but she feels it. The man who no longer tries to convince her becomes the man who holds the most influence over her thoughts, and that's the secret. Your stillness isn't empty, it's powerful. Your absence isn't neglect. It's a mirror. One that forces her to see the parts of herself she avoided. Let your silence, your restraint, your poise tell the story. Because in a world full of men explaining themselves, the one who doesn't becomes unforgettable. True strength in a man isn't about how forcefully he can lead others. It's about how powerfully he can lead himself. Self-mastery, while rarely celebrated in today's noisy culture, remains one of the most compelling forces in shaping a man's destiny. A man who chooses to walk away the moment he senses disrespect, who doesn't allow his peace to be disturbed by trivial insults or provocations, and who maintains composure even in moments of chaos. This man is operating at a higher level. His presence alone commands attention. There's no need for raised voices or dramatic gestures. The sheer stillness of his presence communicates volumes. In this segment, we unravel how mastering your internal world shifts the dynamic of every external interaction. When you no longer react impulsively, you break patterns, you take back your power. The more you learn to regulate your emotions, the less others can manipulate you. This isn't about bottling up feelings, it's about channeling them into strength. Controlled energy is magnetic. It's the man who thinks before speaking, who steps back before acting, who carries himself with intention. That leaves the deepest impression. Especially in relationships, restraint becomes a form of power. You no longer chase, over-explain, or react out of fear. You move with certainty. You set boundaries not to control her, but to protect your own peace. And in doing so, you become the calm in her storm, the steady presence she didn't know she needed. Self-control, at its core, is the bridge between chaos and clarity, between noise and purpose. Mastering it won't just elevate your relationships, it will elevate your life. Detachment is not about running from your emotions. It's about learning to rise above them. When you master detachment, you reclaim your power. No longer are you chained to someone else's attention, validation, or emotional state. You learn to observe without reacting, to feel without drowning, and to walk away without needing to be chased. This is what makes you powerful in her eyes. Not because you're cold, but because you're calm. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about yourself than about how you're perceived. Think of the man who doesn't flinch when he's ignored, who doesn't explain himself when misunderstood, who doesn't chase when someone walks away. He is the one who becomes unforgettable. Why? Because he's rare. Because in a world that glorifies drama, his stillness becomes magnetic. This type of man confuses hurries, not indifferent, but he's unbothered. He's present, but never desperate. He listens, but doesn't plead. He desires, but doesn't need. And in this paradox lies his power. Women can't resist men who detach not because they're inaccessible, but because they're in control. When you're no longer swayed by her silence or her storms, you become the eye of the hurricane, the calm center around which everything else spins. She sees your value not in what you say, but in what you don't. She feels your depth not in what you reveal, but in what you withhold. Your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. This level of emotional discipline doesn't just elevate your relationships, it changes how the world responds to you. People respect those who respect themselves. A man who knows when to stay silent, when to walk away, when to hold the line without trembling. That man commands attention without asking for it. That man, whether she admits it or not, is the one she thinks about long after the conversation ends. You were never born to live on pause, waiting endlessly for someone to remember you when their world goes quiet. You were never meant to be the late-night option, the backup plan when everything else falls through. You deserve more than fleeting attention. You deserve to be chosen, wholly and deliberately. The kind of love you're worthy of doesn't arrive in breadcrumbs. It shows up with clarity, with presence, and with purpose. It feels like home, not a storm. It settles your mind, steadies your heartbeat, and gives your soul room to breathe. Love, real love, doesn't make you anxious, it anchors you. So if you find yourself questioning your place in someone's life, constantly checking your phone for their reply, hoping that today is the day they see your value, stop and ask, why are you gambling your peace for a maybe? True connection doesn't leave you dangling on the edge of hope, doesn't make you decode mixed signals or chase after validation. It communicates openly, it shows up consistently, and most of all, it leaves no room for confusion. Not too much for asking to be seen. You're not too demanding for wanting a love that feels like safety instead of survival. If someone cannot give you that, you owe it to yourself to step away with grace, but without apology. Your peace is sacred, and you don't owe it to anyone who treats your presence like a convenience. Walk away not to punish them, but to protect yourself. You're not here to be someone's emotional layover. You're here to be met, matched, and deeply valued.